We have decided the lake house goes to Blaine.
To new beginnings.
My name is Hannah Brooks. I am 34 years old. The moment my father stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, lifted the keys to my grandmother's lake house, and announced that it belonged to my younger brother now, the room erupted in applause. Everyone smiled. Everyone except me. Because the house had been left to me. Legally. Personally. And intentionally. What nobody at that table knew was that my grandmother had spent years preparing for this exact betrayal. The story really began 2 years earlier. My grandmother Evelyn Parker lived on the edge of Silver Lake, a quiet stretch of water surrounded by pine trees and weathered docks in northern Michigan. Her small cedar house stood on a gentle rise overlooking the water. Every summer of my childhood lived inside those walls. Every memory worth keeping seemed to belong there. When I was young, the lake house felt like another world. A safer world. A kinder world. Back then, my parents barely noticed the difference between their 2 children. Or perhaps they did. Maybe that was the problem. My younger brother Mason was the center of every conversation, every celebration, every sacrifice. If Mason wanted something, schedules changed. Plans moved. Rules disappeared. If I wanted something, I learned to wait. Then wait longer. By the time I became an adult, disappointment felt as familiar as breathing. But Grandma Evelyn never treated me that way. She saw things other people ignored. The effort. The patience. The quiet resilience. 3 years before she passed away, she invited me to spend a weekend at the lake house. She was 78 then. Her silver hair shimmered beneath the afternoon sunlight as she sat on the porch overlooking the water. I remember the smell of pine needles. The distant cry of gulls. The slow rhythm of waves touching the shoreline. She handed me a small brass key attached to a faded wooden tag. I laughed softly. "What is this for?" She smiled. "The future." At first I thought she was joking. Then she placed a folder on the table between us. Property documents. Ownership papers. My name was written across every page. I stared at them. Unable to speak. "Grandma." The word barely escaped my lips. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Hannah, I want you to have the lake house." I shook my head immediately. "Mason will expect it." "I know. Mom and Dad won't like this." "I know that too." The smile never left her face. Then her eyes sharpened. The same eyes that had raised a family, built a business, survived loss, and learned exactly who people became when money entered the conversation. "They'll fight it." A chill moved through me. "What do you mean?" She looked out at the water for several seconds. "They've been planning for years." The words landed heavily. Quietly. Dangerously. I suddenly understood she wasn't talking about a house. She was talking about control. For years, my parents assumed everything my grandmother owned would eventually flow through them. They believed they would decide where every dollar went. Who deserved what? Who mattered? Grandma Evelyn had other ideas. "You show up, Hannah." She squeezed my hand again. "When my roof leaked, you came. When I had surgery, you stayed. When I was lonely, you listened." Her voice softened. "Mason visits when he wants something." I felt tears building behind my eyes. The lake shimmered beneath the evening sun. Golden reflections danced across the water like scattered pieces of light. "This house isn't for someone who wants it," she said. "It's for someone who loves it." For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not tolerated. Not overlooked. Seen. After she passed away the following year, her will confirmed everything. The lake house belonged entirely to me. The decision was final. The documents were airtight. The lawyers approved every detail. And yet, from the moment the will was read, tension spread through the family like a slow-moving storm. My mother stopped mentioning the house. My father started asking questions about maintenance costs. Mason joked about turning it into a vacation rental. Every conversation circled back to the same destination. The house. Always the house. At first, I believed time would settle things. I was wrong. The pressure only grew stronger. Then, 1 week before Thanksgiving, my mother sent a text message. Family is family, Hannah. Let's put the past behind us. Everyone misses you. Come to dinner. Reading those words, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. Maybe they had changed. Maybe grief had softened everyone. Maybe we could finally be a family. I stared out my apartment window as snow drifted across the darkening evening sky. Far away, beyond frozen roads and pine forests, the lake house stood quietly beside the water. Waiting. Keeping its secrets. And somewhere deep inside, a warning whispered that my grandmother's predictions were not finished yet. I should have listened. Thanksgiving morning arrived wrapped in cold gray skies and drifting snow. I left my apartment just after noon, carrying a leather tote that held the property documents for the lake house. I rarely brought them anywhere, but something inside me wanted them close. Maybe it was caution. Maybe it was instinct. The drive to my parents' house took a little over an hour. As the miles passed beneath my tires, I kept replaying my mother's text message. Family is family. Everyone misses you. Come to dinner. Simple words. Comforting words. Yet every time I thought about them, Grandma Evelyn's voice echoed somewhere in the back of my mind. They'll fight it. The closer I got to the house, the harder it became to ignore that warning. My parents lived in a large colonial home outside Lansing. The driveway was already packed when I arrived. Cars lined both sides of the street. Through the windows I could see warm yellow light, moving shadows, and clusters of relatives talking and laughing. More than 20 family members had come. Uncles. Aunts. Cousins. Neighbors. Family friends. The entire Brooks family seemed to be gathered under one roof. I parked near the end of the block and sat in my car for a moment. Taking a breath. Preparing myself. Then I stepped into the cold and walked toward the house. The front door opened before I even reached it. My mother appeared with a bright smile. Hannah. She wrapped her arms around me. For a brief second, I almost believed everything had changed. Almost. Inside, the smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and baked apples filled the air. Conversations overlapped. Laughter bounced. From room to room. People greeted me warmly. Yet beneath the surface, something felt off. Like a stage play where everyone already knew their lines except one actor. Me. Mason stood near the fireplace speaking to several cousins. At 31, he still carried himself with effortless confidence. The confidence of someone who had spent his entire life being told yes. When he saw me, he raised his glass. Hey, sis. His smile was friendly. Too friendly. I smiled back. Something about it felt rehearsed. As the afternoon unfolded, I noticed another familiar face sitting quietly near the back porch. Walter Jenkins. My grandmother's longtime neighbor. He was in his early 70s now, lean and weathered, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. Walter had lived beside Silver Lake for decades. He knew every inch of the property. Every tree. Every dock. Every secret. When he noticed me approaching, he smiled softly. Hannah. It's good to see you, Walter. We stepped outside onto the porch where the cold air muted the noise from inside. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Walter looked toward the snowy horizon. Your grandmother would be proud of you. Emotion tightened my chest. I miss her every day. I know. His voice grew quieter. She worried about you. That surprised me. Worried? Walter nodded. The year before she died, she talked about your father often. A chill moved through me. What did she say? He studied me carefully. She believed he'd eventually try to take the lake house. The words landed heavily. Exactly like the warning she had given me years earlier. I felt my stomach tighten. Did she tell you why? Walter sighed. Because some people mistake ownership for authority. I stared at him, unsure what to say. Then he leaned closer. Your grandmother documented everything. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? A faint smile crossed his face. Just remember that Evelyn Parker was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Before I could ask another question, the back door opened. My mother called everyone inside for dinner. As we walked back toward the dining room, Walter touched my arm. One sentence. Quiet. Deliberate. If something strange happens tonight, don't panic. The dining room glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. The table stretched nearly the entire length of the room. Every seat filled. Every conversation flowing. Every smile perfectly placed. I sat halfway down the table. Across from Mason. 3 seats away from my father. As everyone settled in, I noticed something that made my pulse slow. Then stop. My father wasn't watching the food. He wasn't watching the guests. He wasn't watching Mason. His eyes kept drifting toward the leather tote resting beside my chair. Again. And again. And again. The property documents were inside. And suddenly, for the first time all day, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't attending a family dinner. I was sitting inside a carefully planned operation. And somehow, the lake house was still the target. Dinner began with all the familiar traditions. Turkey. Stuffing. Sweet potatoes. Family stories repeated for the 100th time. Anyone looking from the outside would have seen a perfect Thanksgiving gathering. But I could feel tension hiding beneath every smile. My father sat at the head of the table, directing conversations the way a conductor directs an orchestra. Whenever discussion drifted away from Mason, he steered it back. Mason's business plans. Mason's future. Mason's ambitions. The pattern felt painfully familiar. I had lived it my entire life. At 16, my birthday party had been cancelled because Mason wanted to attend a football tournament. At 18, my parents arrived late to my graduation because Mason needed help buying a car. At 26, after I earned my accounting certification, my mother congratulated me for less than a minute before asking if I could help Mason organize his finances. For years I convinced myself it didn't matter. For years I accepted being second. But sitting there that night, I finally saw the pattern clearly. I had never been second. I had simply never been considered. The realization hurt more than I expected. As dessert arrived, the atmosphere shifted. The conversations narrowed. People seemed to be waiting for something. My father stood. At first nobody reacted. Then the room gradually grew quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations faded. Even the children seemed to sense something important was about to happen. My father lifted his glass. I want to make a special announcement. Applause followed immediately. Not loud. But eager. Prepared. My stomach tightened. Across the room, I caught Walter watching silently. His expression had gone completely still. My father smiled. Mason has worked incredibly hard this year. More applause. Mason lowered his head modestly, though I noticed the corners of his mouth lifting. My mother beamed with pride. My father continued. And because family should support family, we've decided it's time to help him build something lasting. The room nodded approvingly. I felt a growing sense of unease. Then my father walked away from the table. Not toward Mason. Not toward the fireplace. Toward me. Toward my chair. Toward the leather tote resting beside it. Every instinct inside me screamed. My pulse hammered. The room blurred. For one impossible second, I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. My father bent down calmly. Opened the tote. Reached inside. And removed the property folder. The folder containing ownership documents for the lake house. A collective murmur spread across the room. My father turned toward Mason. Holding the folder high enough for everyone to see. My entire body went cold. No. Surely not. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But then he did exactly what Grandma Evelyn had predicted years ago. He crossed the room. Placed the folder into Mason's hands. And smiled. This belongs with someone who'll actually use it. Silence. Absolute silence. The words echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Mason accepted the folder. Accepted it. Without hesitation. Without surprise. Without asking a single question. Thanks, Dad. My mother's smile widened. There, she said softly. That's what family does. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I looked around the table. Faces everywhere. Aunts. Uncles. Cousins. Friends. Not one person objected. Not one. Years of being overlooked suddenly condensed into a single moment. A single brutal truth. They all expected me to surrender. Again. Just like. Always. My father folded his arms. Confident. Certain. Victorious. He thought the battle was over. He thought I would stay quiet. The old Hannah might have. The girl who spent her life apologizing for existing. The woman who accepted being overlooked. But that version of me had died somewhere between Grandma Evelyn's porch and this dining room. Slowly, I stood. My chair scraped across the hardwood floor. The sound cut through the silence. Every eye turned toward me. My father looked almost relieved. He expected tears. Expected pleading. Expected surrender. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket. Pulled out my phone. And smiled. A small smile. Calm. Steady. The kind of smile that appears when someone finally realizes they hold more power than anyone in the room understands. What are you doing? My mother asked. I looked directly at my father. Then at Mason. Then at the property folder resting in his hands. Finally, I answered. I'm making a phone call. For the first time all evening, confidence vanished from my father's face. Because somewhere deep inside, he suddenly realized something. Grandma Evelyn had always been 3 steps ahead. And so was I. The silence after my phone call felt heavier than the winter storm gathering outside. Nobody returned to dessert. Nobody touched their coffee. The entire dining room seemed trapped between disbelief and fear. My father tried to recover first. He laughed. A short, forced laugh. You called a lawyer over a family discussion? His voice carried confidence. But his eyes betrayed him. For the first time that evening, he looked uncertain. I remained standing. It stopped being a family discussion when you took my property. My mother shook her head dramatically. Hannah, don't make this bigger than it needs to be. I almost smiled. That sentence had followed me my entire life. Every time someone crossed a line. Every time I was expected to sacrifice. Every time I was asked to stay silent. Don't make it bigger. The truth was simple. I wasn't making it bigger. I was simply refusing to make myself smaller. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the front windows. The room immediately fell silent. A car door closed. Footsteps approached. Then the doorbell rang. Walter was the first person to stand. A faint smile crossed his weathered face. Right on time. My father's expression darkened. I walked to the front door and opened it. Rebecca Collins stood outside holding a thick leather portfolio. She was 73 years old. Elegant. Sharp. Completely unshaken by the cold wind swirling around her. For more than 40 years she had been my grandmother's attorney and closest friend. She looked at me once. Then nodded. "You all right?" "Yes." "Good." Together we walked into the dining room. The atmosphere changed instantly. Rebecca carried authority the way some people carry wealth. Without effort. Without announcement. She placed her portfolio on the table. Looked directly at my father. And spoke. "Daniel Brooks." No greeting. No small talk. Only his name. My father straightened. "This is unnecessary." Rebecca ignored him completely. She opened the portfolio and removed several documents. Then a sealed envelope. The moment I saw my grandmother's handwriting on the front, my heart stopped. The room seemed to shrink. Every eye locked onto the envelope. Rebecca placed it gently on the table. "Evelyn instructed me to keep this sealed unless someone attempted to take the lake house from Hannah." A visible ripple passed through the room. My mother went pale. Mason's confident smile disappeared. Rebecca continued. Apparently she knew this day might come. The envelope crackled softly as she broke the seal. Then she unfolded the letter. The room became completely still. And suddenly my grandmother was back among us. Not physically. But through her words. Through her voice. Through her truth. Rebecca began reading. "If this letter is being read, then Daniel tried to take the lake house. I knew he would." Gasps echoed around the table. My father froze. Rebecca continued. "Daniel came to me 3 separate times asking me to change my will. 3 separate times I refused. I chose Hannah because she understands responsibility. She protects what matters. She never loved my property. She loved me." My mother covered her mouth. Mason stared at the floor. Rebecca turned the page. Then came the real surprise. The surprise nobody expected. Not even me. Because if Daniel succeeds in forcing this issue, Rebecca is authorized to activate the Parker family trust. I felt my pulse quicken. Trust? What trust? Rebecca lowered the letter and removed another document from her portfolio. The room watched in stunned silence. Evelyn established a private trust approximately 18 months before her death. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire room seemed frozen in place. Rebecca looked directly at me. "Hannah, effective immediately, you are sole trustee and sole beneficiary." My mind struggled to process the words. My father suddenly stood. "What trust?" His voice cracked. Rebecca finally looked at him. Cold. Controlled. Precise. "The trust currently contains $4.2 million in assets." The room exploded. Shock. Disbelief. Whispers. My mother's chair nearly tipped backward. Mason's face turned completely white. My father looked as though someone had punched him in the chest. But Rebecca wasn't finished. Evelyn created one final condition. The room fell silent again. If anyone attempted to challenge Hannah's ownership of the lake house, control of the entire trust would transfer exclusively to Hannah. My grandmother had known. She had anticipated everything. Every manipulation. Every scheme. Every act of entitlement. And she had built a trap years before any of us realized it existed. I slowly looked around the room. At my stunned relatives. At my trembling mother. At my brother. At my father. The man who had spent his life controlling every outcome. For the first time, he had lost completely. Not because I was stronger. Not because I was louder. But because a woman everyone underestimated had quietly prepared for war long before the battle began. And in that moment, I finally understood something about myself. I wasn't the weak daughter they had always imagined. I was the person Grandma Evelyn trusted with everything. And now everyone in that room knew it too. The fallout began before Thanksgiving night was over. I stood in my parents' dining room surrounded by stunned relatives, holding documents that had just changed everything. The lake house was still mine. The trust belonged to me. And for the first time in my life, nobody could take either one away. My father sat motionless at the head of the table. The man who had controlled every family decision for decades suddenly looked smaller. Older. Fragile. Not because he had lost money. Because he had lost authority. The room had seen the truth. And once truth enters a room, it rarely leaves. I left shortly after Rebecca finished speaking. The snow had started falling harder. Large white flakes drifted through the darkness as I walked toward my car. Behind me, the house glowed with warm yellow light. But it no longer felt like home. Oddly enough, that realization didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. The following weeks changed everything. Family members who had remained silent during Thanksgiving suddenly found their voices. My aunt called first. Then 2 cousins. Then several family friends. Most said the same thing. We didn't know. Some apologized. Some cried. Some admitted they had watched my parents favor Mason for years but never spoke up because it seemed easier to stay quiet. Walter once told me that silence protects the wrong people. Now I understood exactly what he meant. Meanwhile, the trust became public knowledge inside the family. $4.2 million. The number spread like wildfire. Ironically, nobody talked about the money itself. They talked about why Grandma Evelyn created it. Because she knew. Because she saw what others refused to see. Because she trusted me. That mattered more than any amount of money ever could. Mason called 3 weeks later. His voice sounded different. Less confident. Less certain. I didn't know about the trust. I know. A long silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. He apologized. Not perfectly. Not dramatically. But sincerely. For the first time in our lives, he admitted that he had benefited from favoritism. He admitted that he never questioned it because it worked in his favor. Hearing those words felt strangely emotional. Not because they fixed the past. Because they acknowledged it. Sometimes acknowledgement is where healing begins. My mother struggled the most. She called. Constantly. Left messages. Sent texts. Tried to explain. Tried to justify. Then eventually stopped trying to justify anything at all. One evening she left a voicemail that simply said, "I should have protected both my children." I listened to it 3 times. Then I cried. Not because I forgave her immediately. Because it was the first honest thing I had heard from her in years. My father took longer. Much longer. Nearly 3 months passed before he finally called. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. He never said the words "I'm sorry." I don't think he knew how. But he did say something else. Something that mattered. Your grandmother was right. 4 words. Simple. Painful. Expensive. 4 words that cost him more pride than most people would ever understand. When spring arrived, I drove to Silver Lake. The ice had melted. The water sparkled beneath clear blue skies. The old cedar house stood exactly where it always had. Steady. Patient. Waiting. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Sunlight poured through the windows. Dust floated through golden beams of light. For a moment, I could almost hear Grandma Evelyn humming in the kitchen. Almost. I spent the next several months restoring the property. Not because it needed saving. Because it deserved preserving. Part of the trust funded scholarships for local students. Another portion supported the community center my grandmother loved. The rest remained invested for the future. Exactly the way she would have wanted. One evening, near sunset, I sat alone on the dock. The lake stretched endlessly before me. Orange light danced across the water. A gentle breeze stirred the pine trees behind the house. I looked down at the brass key she had given me years earlier. The future. That was what she had called it. Now I finally understood. The lake house was never the true inheritance. The trust wasn't either. The real inheritance was something far more valuable. My voice. My confidence. My ability to stand my ground when everyone expected me to surrender. Grandma Evelyn didn't leave me a house. She left me proof that I mattered. And that changed everything. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had someone believe in you when nobody else did? I would love to hear your story. And if you enjoy powerful family redemption stories like this one, please like, subscribe, and join the Still Waters Payback community so you never miss the next story. Some inheritances are measured in money. The most important ones are measured in courage.